Okay, so now that we've kind of thought about the different kinds of interest groups that are out there, the different reasons for joining, maybe I join because I get some kind of material benefit, maybe I join because I really care about the policy, maybe I join because it's like a club and it's a group of people that feel the same way as I do about something. For whatever reason, we've kind of talked through all of that stuff. Now what we want to do is we're going to focus specifically on how do interest groups attempt to impact public policy. Okay, that's our focus. So we've got the potentially non-political side, but now we want to know is how do interest groups respond? So what's going to happen is you guys are going to be split into groups, and you're going to be given a slide that's printed out that's going to have a scenario. That is just a current event scenario. They're all real things that happen. Some of them are a little bit older, but most of them are from the last couple years as President Trump has been in office. What you're going to do is you're going to be grouped with other interest groups who will also care about that same topic. The key is, though, you guys, you are not necessarily agreeing on the topic. So, for example, on one of those problems, one of your groups might be very much in support of the action that President Trump took, whereas another group might not be in support of that. You might all agree, that's fine, but you might not agree, and that's totally okay too. That was deliberate. But I specifically have chosen interest groups that should have a position on that policy. Now, some of it's a reach. You're going to have to think a little bit, but you should be able to figure that part out. What I'm going to ask you to do is to attempt to explain to us how you would want to influence that policy issue. I care far less about what your position is and far more about what kind of actions you plan to take to remedy that. Does that make sense? Yes, you're going to have to consider, that's great. Tell me what you're going to think and what you're going to like, but we're kind of moving past ideology. Remember, we're talking about the structure and function. So I want you to think, because of their ideology, what is their function going to be? Again, you and the group, other interest groups may agree, you may disagree. That's okay. What's going to happen then is you guys will have the remainder of today to continue kind of working about how you feel about this issue and to come up with a plan for how you're going to present your problem and how you're going to present your solution. And then you're going to open yourself up to questions. It's going to be kind of like a seminar thing. I will be back next class and I'll question you and offer some suggestions and hints as well as the group. Okay, so things I want you to consider. I want you to think about all of the tools that interest groups have in relationship to these. Interest groups lobby the legislature. They also lobby bureaucrats. Remember that in relationship to the courts, they can use litigation as a tactic where they can potentially sponsor lawsuits and help to enact public policy through the courts, or they can write amicus curiae briefs where they try to use, your textbook refers to that as lobbying the courts. I'm not a huge fan of that language. Amicus curiae briefs are basically when the lobbyists, they write a brief, they submit it to the court, and it's part of an open record. But the justices do care about those. They do help them to understand public opinion and what's happening. Think about what interest groups can do in relationship to political parties and how those two can work with one another. What can they do in relationship to the media? How can they use the media to their advantage to potentially mobilize their supporters through grassroots lobbying or draw attention to a broader issue? How could they use the media to try to get attention of one of the policymakers? What can the interest group do in relationship to campaigns? Is impacting the campaign the way to potentially impact the policy? And then think about them in relationship to their membership. So not every problem is going to lend itself to all of these. You have a myriad of problems, and you're simply going to try to think about how your group could use any of the tools at your disposal to potentially impact one of these. Okay? So I'm going to show you what's going to happen is during the next class, you're going to give me these presentations. You'll have about 15 minutes at the start of next class to kind of gather your ideas and ask me any questions, and then the presentations are going to happen. I'm going to give you, no one in class will do this particular scenario, just so you can kind of understand what I'm asking you to do. Okay, so it says we have a recent rally. It was held at the University of Virginia. It put the spotlight on mounting racial tensions in this country. The rally resulted in arrests, significant injuries, and the death of counter-protester Heather Heyer. Criticism is mounted against all involved parties on images of violence that were blasted across the globe. So, if we go down and look in the notes, the interest groups that would have been assigned to this are the NAACP and the American Civil Liberties Union. So, from my perspective, the NAACP would definitely want to highlight and make sure to criticize what went on at this rally. It would want to highlight the racial tension, and they would very specifically want to encourage policymakers to take a stand against this. So I would think that the NAACP would want to go public. They would want to build upon these images of violence, and they would use their membership to try to get members of Congress or people they know in the executive branch to take a public stance against this. Now, the American Civil Liberties Union is in a tough position because they stand very much for freedom of speech. And so this notion that people, even if they're saying things that are detestable, they still have this idea of freedom of speech, and they have an opportunity to protest and say things that, even though we might not like them, they still have a right to say them. So the ACLU is going to have to somehow, some way, figure out how do we use our tools to highlight the need for free expression and free ideas, but maybe to do those in a safe environment. So maybe the ACLU calls on members of Congress to craft legislation that will provide safe places for people to express themselves. Maybe they will put pressure on local government to provide more intense police protection for the different kind of protest groups. I think they would also want to go public and garner some kind of media attention, but they would want to do it for like a different perspective. So when you guys are sitting in your groups, you're talking through these scenarios and you're thinking about what you want, but more importantly, back to that list of things to consider, you're thinking about this. How can we use one or more of these relationships to potentially get some whatever result is? You obviously can use your devices if you need to. These are all real life situations, but my preference would be that you don't simply look up the group and see what the group's perspective was on that issue. I want you to think critically a little bit, because you're going to have to be able to tell me how interest groups can influence policy. So this is a really good way for you to think through that. Okay. Your presentations aren't formal. I don't need a PowerPoint or anything like that. If you just want to jot some stuff on a piece of paper as a group, and that is what you will be working on for the remainder of class. Like I said, at the start of next class, you'll have 15 to 20 minutes, and I will be back to answer any kind of questions. Okay, good luck.